Hi, this is Deepa Nagarajan, #1 OKR specialist and strategy consultant. Today I'm going to talk to you about managing a virtual workforce. I did cover this point in my last video, and there was a lot of requests that came to me to elaborate a little more on this point, so I'm going to share a few more insights and useful tips in terms of handling your virtual workforce. And I think during this time of crisis, this is important, as well as it looks like going to become the way of the work in future. So let's do a bit of a deep dive on managing a virtual workforce. There are 5 points that I would like to cover in terms of how do you create a virtual workforce management, right? There are 5 points basically. First, creating the right infrastructure, the remote working infrastructure. Point number 2, designing the right work from home policies and procedures. Number 3, the organization design and the structuring, which you need to take care of. Number 4, the way you're going to design and manage your goals, the organization as well as the team goals. Number 5, how do you design your performance management, or how do you redesign your performance management and create the right performance conversations within the organization. So these are the 5 points that we're going to cover. Let's talk about point number 1. First of all, how do you create the right remote working infrastructure? To create the right remote working infrastructure, you need to consider 5 elements. The basic system requirements, right, which includes the right technologies, tools, etc. The bandwidth that is required for a large workforce to be working remotely and accessing your VPN. The critical workforce management. There is a lot of discussions that are happening in today's organization that while the larger workforce is going to be working remotely, there are certain critical resources who will be required on premise. So how do you manage this critical workforce, and how do you ensure that they are protected and they are given the right safety equipments and measures? The security requirements, the data security, and what about the remote data access, etc. So all the security requirements will need to be considered, re-looked at, and you may need to redeploy certain security policies based on the current requirements and the future requirements. So consider the security requirements too. And last but not least, the tools and channels that you will require to ensure effective collaboration and communication to happen within the organization. So do consider all these 5 elements and take into account your existing infrastructure that is there, and what needs to change and what can remain as is. So these are the 5 elements that you need to consider. Point number 2, please relook at and, if required, redesign your work from home policies. And even here, you need to consider certain elements. Who are actually, first of all, the critical workforce? What basis, what are you identifying the critical workforce who need to work on premise? Second, the policy covering the security issues and other sensitive issues for a virtual workforce. Basically the do's and don'ts, what need to be followed by all the employees. Third, if you have a reimbursement policy, how does that change with a larger workforce working from their homes or other remote locations? Number 4, the mobile and laptop usage policy, or even issuing new laptops for critical workforce who are going to be working remotely. Number 5, how do you track the weekly deliverables and commitments, and what is the policy regarding reporting structures and mechanisms? So these are some of the elements that you need to reconsider, and if required, redesign your work from home policies. Point number 3, and this is a very important point, it's about organization design or redesign in this case, right? And there are 3 elements here that you may need to consider. First is the role and responsibility structures. To define the roles clearly, who has to do what, who has to deliver what, because when you have a remote workforce, there could be clashes or unclear boundaries between the roles and responsibilities. So defining very clearly who's responsible for what, who has to deliver what, who is the person that needs to be approached if there are certain issues, how does it get resolved, how does it get communicated, how do you handle delays, and in a nutshell, basically you need to have a proper decision-making matrix. So this is one very important point. The second thing is your leadership matrix. I think this is very important to prepare your leaders to lead through this cultural shift, right? Because organization working from remote places, it is actually a cultural shift, and moving away from processes and focusing more on outcomes is going to be very, very critical, right? So move away from processes, because processes sometimes become redundant. You need to trust people. You need to give them the free hand to actually work on their deliverables and bring it to you. So you got to focus on the outcomes of the work processes rather than the process itself. and the frequency of how often and how well you communicate with your teams. So checking in, right? Those check-in mechanisms are very, very critical. And of course, you have to empower your team and nurture them and be there for them, which brings us to the third point. It is all about creating an empathic culture. If you want empathic culture and a good teamwork happening within the organization, you need to start that evolution, right? So create an empathic culture, first of all, by you having the empathic conversations with your team members. So initiate that empathic culture within the organization. Point number 4, the goal management. How do you actually set the right goals and the right objectives for a team that's going to be dispersed and working remotely? How do you set the objectives for a virtual workforce? So it is very important to, first of all, setting ambitious yet achievable goals. It is also very important to define the right key results and the timeline of the deliverables. Also, thirdly, it is also important to understand whether you have taken the right initiatives which are aligned to the key results. So you have your objectives, you have your key results, and you have the right initiatives that you need to define. So this can be very well handled through a beautiful goal setting mechanism like OKRs, right? And also, how do you create the right supportive and collaborative matrix? How do you create collaborative OKRs too? So this is also a very, very important part of your overall goal management. And of course, you need to have the right check-in mechanisms. Setting goals and objectives is good, but having the right cadence mechanism and checking in with your employees who are working remotely, very, very important. Point number 5, which is a very important point, actually having the right organization and individual performance management framework. Now, this has several elements that you will need to reconsider. How do you dynamically, first of all, adjust the goals and objectives? Which means when you set your objectives, you need to ensure that they're elastic and flexible enough to respond to the changing market needs and some of the uncertainties that may pop up later. Right? Second, realigning the team's goals to the organization goals. So OKRs are not just on the organization level, but also you need to ensure that the team's OKRs are also getting aligned to the organizational OKRs. Point number 3, how do you also define the individual key responsibilities or the IKRs, which is in alignment with the OKRs? And based on these IKRs, how do you have meaningful performance conversations with your team members? And of course, after you have these performance conversations, how do you create the right actionable feedback mechanisms? And then how often do you want to do these kind of reviews, and how do you create a proper review mechanism, and what should be the frequency of reviews? So these are the few points that I wanted to share with you in terms of how to manage a remote workforce. If you like the video, please do share it with your teams, please do share it with your leadership team, and this could be the game changer for your organization in terms of how do you recreate the right kind of organization structure and the right remote workforce possibility. Right? Please do subscribe to our channel and do not forget to press the bell icon, and we'll come back to you with more information as to how you can gear up for the changing times that is coming up.